Can a snake eat itself starting with its tail?
Well, it can, obviously. You can reach the tail, so...
I don't think it can.
Really?
I always wonder about the last bite because you can't bite your neck. Right? Anyway, it's not about the snake, Tim. It's not about the
Yes.
snake.
This episode of Stand Up Business is sponsored by Forward Asset Management, an independent, owner-managed firm built on the principles of investment stewardship, always prioritizing investors' interests above its own.
Mark, good morning.
Good morning. The US election is done and dusty. I mean, dusted. Sorry, dusted. Yeah. So, give me your synopsis, Tim, and what happened?
I think, one doesn't like to brag. One does like to brag. I don't like to seem as though I brag.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the exception to that rule.
But 2.5 weeks ago, I predicted the victory for a person called Donald Trump Esquire. And I'm very ashamed to say that I was correct. And it's a weird feeling to be proved right and also to be embarrassed about it.
This happens to me on a daily basis, so I wouldn't feel alone in that. Yeah. Well, I think it was the absence of the alternative. I think the election was lost when Biden overstayed his welcome.
Yes, no,
I don't think it was won.
Yeah.
If he'd stood back like a year ago, or 2 years ago,
Yes,
or 3 years ago,
yes,
and said, okay, we need to be planning for the next president of the United States, and it's obviously not me,
yes.
then they might have come up with a more profound candidate out of their collection of possibles, and who could have fought the election, because essentially Kamala was handed the baton like third leg in the relay, quite a few lengths behind the runner. Okay.
Yes.
And she had no chance. And the last point I'd make is that there is some essence that's been proven here, which is the economic realities do count and they do prevail. And American voters aren't that happy with economics. Is there more to it, Tim?
No. I think you nailed it. I mean, the thing is, people laughed at Trump for bringing up the egg price. He was always talking about the price of eggs. Well, they're not laughing anymore. Because actually, the egg price is really important.
Yeah.
It's not just it's people's perceptions of their own economic state. And my kind of summation of the election is that people cared more about their own household economics than they cared about Trump's very obvious character flaws,
Yeah.
It's noting this wasn't just Trump victory, right? It wasn't just a victory for Trump. Republicans flipped 3 seats in the Senate. Yeah. And they look as though they're probably going to win the House. This is a game set match for the Republicans. This is an absolutely devastating victory against the Democrats, not just against Kamala Harris, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a manifestation of what people are voting against as much as it is what people are voting for. I think this whole question of immigration and all of these and the wars that are happening around the world and all of the rising trends and wokeness and various other things, I think people are starting to worry about the emerging decider trends, and influences. And so they're voting against that. Whether that's wise or not, I'm not passing judgment on the rising trends, but I am saying that people are feeling less and less comfortable, less and less in control. And Trump was preaching a very much, as you say, game, set, and match control game. And people are feeling comforted about that. I mean, I still think, to be blunt, that he's not presidential material. I mean, he's the sort of guy you can have a couple of beers with around a braai and go on about the world and that. But if you woke up the next morning and said, that Uk at the braai, he's president, I'd go, no, man.
No.
Hey? Anyway, it's there. How does it affect us, Tim?
I don't think it affects us as badly as South Africans fear. I've been reading some of the documents because this is what you do. You look at the candidate, and when the candidate wins, you rush off to go and look at the mandate. What's in that document or what's in those documents. Yeah. And I mean, it's very clear that the Republicans' attitude towards Africa in general is to try and embrace it and to try and stop the Chinese influence. One of the documents that I read was massively warm towards Africa, massively, and much warmer towards Africa than Europe, for example. It's a very curious thing that, we're back into that period of international politics where there was, international contestation, and, everybody was trying to be nice to everyone.
Well, maybe we're a soft target with a huge population, and maybe it's who they want to fight, not who they want to embrace. But you take this a bit local, and ask yourself the question: what is informing voters' decisions? And it's populism, and it's popular rhetoric, it's promises without proof. I mean, if you look at Gauteng, for example, where your ANC got 35% in Soweto, the numbers I recall, and yet they lead, and they're in charge. And it seems to me that with enough convincing, no matter, with a total disregard for the truth and without conscience, if you can put in front of voters, let me not say voters who are less informed than they should be, a promise, you kind of get away with it, but not so much. I think the chickens here in South Africa are coming home to roost. I think the realities that we face as a population broadly are going to start outweighing the promises and allegiances based on the past rather than on the prospect of a future. And I think that's when the turning point will come. Until then, we're just following each other about. And it seems to me that the vote is sought for access to the purse, not for service to the people.
Yeah. And, and ironically, that's visible here, obviously, but it's also visible in the States. I mean, it's just the most curious thing that, the world's richest person, Elon Musk, has suddenly thrown his full weight behind Trump. You wonder what he thinks he's going to get out of it, or what he wants, or
money, sir.
Yeah, but this is clear, right? I mean, it's a sort of irony that he's a great entrepreneur, but one of the ways that he's entrepreneurial is that he entrepreneurs quite a lot of money out of the U.S. taxpayer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's speaking money to power, and it happens. Yeah. It seems to me everywhere. I reflect sometimes on what's happening with the CEO pledge that we have locally. Is it actually monitored? Is it actually real? Speculation has it that he'll be the world's first trillionaire by 2027. Okay. Now, a lot of that is founded on extraordinary foresight, his satellite deployment and various other, various other things that he was an entrepreneur in. But the next best, self-actualization, the hierarchy of self-actualization goes past money quite fast. The marginal utility of money diminishes very rapidly beyond a certain point, a point beyond which he has gone a long time ago. And the next thing is power. And that's the only aphrodisiac left. And if you are at the center of power because of money, then you've hit the jackpot, man. And so he has become the Minister of Finance in the USA, for goodness sake, already. What?
Yeah.
Not
but except in his case, it's a little bit more curious because, transparently, his primary motivation, is to get off the planet Earth and get to Mars. He's
mine too. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is strange that it is a strange overlap all around the world that this, that we used to call them oligarchs because they were a Russian thing. Now they're everywhere. Oh, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. The benefit of living on Mars is that you don't have to build, high walls and things. The barriers to entry are quite significant. Okay, you need a rocket just for starters. So I'm in. If we're moving to Mars, I'm in. Tim, someone asked me this question, a mate of mine over the weekend, said, can a snake eat itself starting with its tail?
Right.
What do you answer to that?
Okay. Well, it can, obviously. You can reach the tail. So
I don't think it can.
Really? Why? Because
I don't think it can eat itself.
Because it's too painful. Because every time you take a bite, you're thinking, no, that's not a bad idea.
First of all, if you try and swallow yourself whole, you get into a remorse. Let me just describe it as that. Okay. Because you up your own mouth. Okay. So to speak. Okay. And then I always wonder about the last bite because you can't bite your neck. Right? Anyway, it's not about the snake, Tim. It's not about the snake. But the question is, has this notion of the desirability of private-public partnerships started eating itself up. And I tell you what prompted me down this course of crazy thinking was the article this weekend in City Press, which talked about the cost of exam papers. Now, provinces were given the latitude to choose who they want to do their printing, not just the government printer, which is a perfectly competent place. I've been exposed to it, and they do stuff there. They print your passports. They've got a very sophisticated printing capacity there and all of those good things. And they're an organ of state. So they've got all sorts of things that they can do about confidentiality and so on. The cost of printing matric exam papers went up by something like 2.5 times once it was outsourced to the private sector. Okay. In the Northwest, it went up 3 times, in Limpopo about 2.5, Gauteng. Yeah, and the numbers are big. And so it's curious to me, first of all, that no one does the sort of per student numbers and finds them to be ridiculous, or the percentage change numbers and finds them to be flawed. But opening this channel to the wrong people to engage with the private sector is actually promoting the richness of corruption rather than the quest for efficiency. Is that even vaguely possible to have?
No, I'm totally with you. I mean, somebody did a calculation. We have a problem with ports in South Africa, obviously, because Transnet is, we're inefficient, and we have the most inefficient ports in the world.
Despite having very good grapes.
Yeah. So obviously it's a great idea. It would be a great idea to get these ports into private hands, right? And there has been this whole process with the Durban Pier and so on, and, there's a fight about it and so on. But somebody did do a calculation of how much it would cost Transnet over the longer term in lost income to go through with this process. And it's a lot of money. It's because, the private sector want, they're doing this for profit. I mean, I've never understood why it's so difficult not to just monitor the margin and say, if you get the private sector involved, then your margin, you've got to have a margin. They're going to want a margin of about 20%. But if you give them a margin of more than that, they're ripping you off, right? And if they're giving you a margin less than that, then the thing is going to collapse, and it doesn't make any sense. So, in other words, sort of just to finish my point, so the question is, are you gaining more than 20% inefficiency in going to the private sector? And if you are, do it. If you're not, don't.
Yeah, those sums are trivial. The question is, in whose interest is it to do the sums? Okay, the real foundation of the flaw is that you need, on the one hand, power, and on the other hand, capability. If you strip those apart, and then you can do extraordinary contracts that have no foundation in fair market value, but they are a marriage of convenience between the givers of the contract and the exploiters of the cash. I mean, it's actually, there's a thesis lying there somewhere about how so wrong it is and how so we need to get people, we need just to do the sums. We need in every government office some person who does the sums. They go like, okay, we're outsourcing this, it's going to cost X. And as you say, you've got a tipping point test which says ain't worth it, no matter what. So we're not going to do it. And I still claim that for the majority of state enterprises, it would be better, cheaper, and in our longer term interest to fix what's wrong in government rather than to hand it out at huge cost to the private sector. So it's a conundrum. But I want to ask you about this. Eskom has given notice to the city of Johannesburg. They've had enough. I mean, I think that the city of Johannesburg owes them something like 6.3 billion. Now, that's not a week's work, okay? And that keeps going up by kind of, I don't know, $1 billion a month or some strange number. I don't know the numbers. But the minister's going to meet with the mayor, and I think Eskom was well within their rights to say no more electricity that you don't pay for. But
no, I know. I mean, it's an extraordinary standoff. I mean, and a very important one to have. Because basically what the Eskom is doing is what it should have been doing years and years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Arguably by not doing it then, every time they don't do it, they compound the issue of when they do it, because the bill becomes increasingly unpayable.
Well, it's now impossible.
No, exactly.
We passed a stitch in time,
But you could still come to an agreement, right? Because the problem is not only the accumulated debt, the problem is the immediate debt.
Yeah.
And you could insist that Joburg pays its immediate debt, especially against the income that they're getting from the electricity that they are, passing on to the consumer. I mean, that just makes sense.
One of the solutions is to bypass the municipality responsible for this build-up of unpaid debts and let us pay for our electricity directly, okay, to Eskom.
Except that they do that in Soweto.
Except, and of course there's an except. Yes.
Yeah. So they do that in Soweto, and the response of Soweto citizens is to stand together and not pay their bills at all. So the payment rate in Soweto is now around about 5%. So there's also that danger that you could have a sort of entire community deciding not to pay.
Yeah, it's a complex problem because what do? Electricity is one thing, and then water.
Forward Asset Management has been successfully growing retirement savings since 1981. The company offers premium investment management services tailored for long-run investors in retirement funds and unit trust portfolios. With a multi-decade track record, Forward consistently demonstrates its ability to deliver superior investment returns across a variety of strategies. As an independent, owner-managed boutique, Forward is built on the principles of investment stewardship, always prioritizing investors' interests above its own. The firm constructs diversified investment portfolios based on rigorous fundamental research, high conviction ideas, and an adaptable, value-driven investment policy. While many see market volatility as a risk, Forward embraces it as an opportunity, using these moments to unlock potential and drive growth. For more information, visit forward.com. That's FOORD.com. Forward Asset Management, investment stewardship since 1981.
Sorry, just to stay on electricity just for a second. My question to you this week is oddly going to be a question that you might actually know the answer to.
No, it'll be a first. Yeah, go. That'll be a first. Can you send it to me on my WhatsApp and then I'll be prepared? Yeah.
Okay. How many mayors has Joburg had in the past 6 years?
12.
6.
Oh, man. Only 6.
I know. It's rather pathetic. But, surely that is also part of the problem, right? I mean, this is part of the problem.
Of course it's part of the problem.
Anyway, sorry, you were talking about water.
No, I was just talking generally about essential services. I mean, there are degrees of essential, but essential services. So you do have, as the national government and the local and provincial governments, a conundrum. People need electricity and water. Businesses need them for the economy to survive. And you have an equation to solve, which says people are not going to pay unless, or people are never going to pay, and you need to kind of find an incentive-based mechanism where the people that do pay are treated differently to those that don't. And people who don't are incentivized to do it. And that's how, the system works in private enterprise, is that you are incentivized to do something in the shareholder's interest. And that's why you do it in your own self-interest, which motivates. And so it goes on. It's an enormous problem structurally, okay? And we best solve it because, at some point, the people who are in charge of this will be voted out because the people, and maybe they're precipitating their own demise by bringing this thing to a deadlock. But I'm interested to see. Apparently, it'll be decided on the 12th of December, which is the next big Lekgotla or whatever it is, gathering of the NEC. Tim, tell me something. You know these things, man. I'm going to ask you questions, which you know the answer to. And the first one is, what is the future of mining? Mining was our raison d'etre, forever. And we were gifted natural resources and, let's not go into how we made money out of them, not always wisely, but we are now subject to these exogenous variables, and the real economics are in the NVIDIAs and the satellites and the telecommunications things of the world. But the world cannot survive without raw, precious metals. And so why is mining in such a state, and will it get out of it?
I mean, when you look back on the history of South Africa over this period, the tragedy, the enormous tragedy, will be what South Africa did with its mining sector. Because South Africa's mining sector, it sort of underpins everything else. It underpins the chemical industry. It underpins the construction industry. It
Everything.
underpins I mean, I don't know whether you saw South Africa's, construction sector. It's been beaten to a pulp, right? But it's still declining. I mean, it's still declining. And they are the most immediate. Their biggest contracts are always mining contracts.
Now, but there are new games in town. Agriculture is starting to emerge. Tourism, if we get it right, is starting to emerge. What I'm saying is there been a change of the value equation of South Africa. Have we reached a turning point?
I have a question here too. I also have a question, and I'll make it easy. Yes or no? I was just looking through okay. Okay, well, that would be wrong.
Okay. No.
So the question is, what are the top countries of the world by the value of their natural resources? And is South Africa in the top 10?
No.
Well,
are you talking per capita or per country? Because there's kind of
no total value. Total value.
Yeah. I would say Russia. I don't know the answers, but not us. We're too small a geographical space to. I mean, it depends on what you include in natural resources. Do you include oil? Do you include Okay, well, if you didn't, then we might be very different. I think we're quite up there with precious metals, but if you include oil, it cuts everything out, and I don't know what else is in there. But who's number one? Who's number 1 to 3?
No, you're right. Russia's number 1, the US number 2, Saudi Arabia, of course, because of oil, then Canada, and then the interesting one, I think, is Brazil and Australia, because they just have this very wide, array of different minerals. Anyway, if you total them all up, South Africa's not close to the top 10. You need dollars in natural resource reserves to be in the top 10, and we're not there. But it's interesting to me because it's South Africa's always seen its natural resource gift as its shortcut to prosperity.
Not only is it shortcut to prosperity, but it's ground cover for all eras.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should be thinking about it in a more, which we are in a sense, in a more multi-dimensional kind of way.
We've run out of time, but I'd like the answer next week, perhaps, to the question: are we suffering from food poisoning or from poisoned food? Those are two very, very different causes.
Can I say now, yes? Or no?
Yes, you can.
Go on, Mark. See you next week.
Okay, another interesting week ahead. See you next time.